Welcome to Fruit Snacks, a weekday podcast that covers big ideas about the Christian worldview in a bite-sized format. Hey everyone, in today's episode, I wanted to cover a cultural context kind of question and topic. And it's a question that maybe you've thought about before, but it's one that comes up every once in a while, especially around the time of Easter, as a way of picking apart the gospel narrative or trying to undermine the reliability of the New Testament. And the question is simply, how in the world could the Bible get a detail so wrong as to suggest that Jesus was buried for 3 days? He wasn't buried for 3 days. How in the world are Good Friday and Easter Sunday 3 days apart? They're barely 36 hours apart. If Jesus was crucified on the late afternoon of Friday, and the tomb was empty by first light on Sunday when the women went to go and anoint the body of Jesus and found the tomb empty. That's not even 36 hours. So why does the Bible say that it was 3 days? Why does Jesus claim to offer the sign of Jonah and to be in the earth for 3 days and so on and so forth? Well, the answer is partly to do with the Jewish culture and with differences in between their time and our time in terms of how time is kept and marked and delineated, and the significance of certain daily events and how they were interpreted compared to how we look at them today. So really, there's just two pieces of the puzzle to get the answer to this question of how Friday to Sunday can be 3 days in the Jewish mind. And the first piece of the puzzle is that the Sabbath began in the evening. In other words, it began at the end of the day before. So in Jewish thinking, a day was over when the sun set because you couldn't do any more things in that day. And so effectively, that day had come to an end. So rather than marking the beginning of a day at midnight, which is a modern concept, or even at first light the next day, as soon as the previous day was over, the next day began, which is why Sabbath was officially from Friday night until Saturday night, because as soon as the sun set on Friday, it was the Sabbath. And the Sabbath lasted until sunset the following day on Saturday night. So sunset to sunset. Part of this has to do with the creation account itself. If we go back and we reread the creation account in Genesis, and this is something, a detail I think that is directly tied into this question, but that we kind of just overlook and don't think about too much. But the text specifically says that it was evening and morning, and that was the first day, because in this thinking that this is the way that the day cycle happened. Evening came first and then morning, which is precisely backwards from how we conceive of it in, as I said, in our modern context. But that was the thinking. So that's a big part of the puzzle. And to give evidence that this is how the Jewish people were thinking about this, I want to direct you to several passages of Scripture in the Gospels. In Mark chapter 15, verse 42, Luke 23, verse 54, and then in John's Gospel, chapter 19, verse 31, and then later in chapter 19, verse 42. What we find are references to things like, because it was the day of preparation, or because it was almost evening, or because the day of preparation was almost over and that the Sabbath was quickly approaching, and things like this. And you start to get this picture that it was Friday, it was late Friday, there was not a lot of time left in the day as far as the sun goes, and as soon as the sun set, it was going to be the Sabbath. And so Jesus had to be buried relatively hastily because they didn't have the luxury of time, because the sun was going to set soon. And then it's the Sabbath, and you can't bury someone on the Sabbath. You can't be unclean ritually on the Sabbath, things like that. And so we see evidence of this cultural kind of thinking right there in the Gospels, in Mark and Luke and in John. So the second piece of the puzzle that will help us clarify this is that in the Jewish thinking, not only did the day begin in the evening, but any part of a day could be counted as a day. So when you were marking time, if any part of the day was involved up until the moment of sunset, you could count that as a full day. And so when you put these two things together, we see pretty easily then that Jesus was crucified on a Friday. He was taken down. He was buried on Friday before sunset, meaning because he was technically in the grave on Friday before sunset, there's one day. He was in the grave all day Saturday until after sunset. And at sunset Saturday, guess what? It's Sunday. So now, even though he was gone at first light or before first light or whenever that was, early in the morning on Sunday, it was after sunset on Saturday, meaning any part of a day. And so you have 3 days in the Jewish thinking between Friday and Sunday, even though it was probably less than 36 hours. So the culture and the context and the history help us to see this really isn't a problem for the Bible or the New Testament at all. It's just an exercise in understanding the history and the culture that the Bible comes from.